Hey guys, welcome back to my sewing room. I decided to throw together this quick video while I am creating my new corset patterns. So today I'll show you guys how to grade a corset pattern from a size 6 up to a custom size that will fit you perfectly. I do have these patterns for sale in my store if you guys are interested. I've graded them from the sizes 2 all the way up to a size 20. So when you're choosing a pattern, make sure that you choose one that's closest to your measurements, and let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so I'm going to start with my size 6 pattern. I would usually start with a size 16, but since our bust is pretty small on this, with the measurements that I'm going to be using today, I'm going to start with the smaller bust pattern, which is a size 6. So I'm going to go ahead and cut out all of my pattern pieces. Okay, so I have all of my pieces cut out and ready to go. This pattern is a 12-piece corset, and we're only going to be working with half today. There are 3 pieces in the front and 3 pieces in the back, and the 2 side front pieces can be combined to make a regular princess seam if you want to. I have my client measurements here, and I like to keep them on a clipboard to stay organized. I have this measurement guide available for download in my group, my Facebook group. If you guys are interested, you guys can check that out. I will be using regular copy paper for our pattern making today because I've literally been waiting over a month for my tracing paper to come in from Blick, and it has not yet. All you need for this is about 6 pieces of paper and some tape, and you'll be good to go. So I'm going to butt 2 pieces of paper together, edge to edge, and tape them together. Okay, so I have my first piece of paper taped together, and I'm going to draw my first horizontal line. We have a line for our bust, our under bust, our waist, and our high hips. We're going to start with just the main corset, and in a separate video, I'll show you guys how to extend this corset down to make a gown. Now let's get grading. All you're going to need for this is your basic see-through ruler, a mechanical pencil. I don't like to use regular pencils because I have to sharpen them, and I don't like sharpening. I'm going to start by drawing a squared horizontal line. We're going to use this straight line to line up all the pieces nice and straight, and we're going to trace around all of the pieces, leaving enough space to make adjustments later on. I like to use my pattern weight to make sure my pattern pieces aren't shifting all over the place while I'm tracing. When I'm tracing, I like to make sure that I'm marking out my underbust and my waistlines to help me align the other pieces, and then I square those lines across. And you do the same for all the other pieces. Today's video is sponsored by, you guessed it, Skillshare. For those of you who are not familiar, Skillshare is an online learning community for creatives where you can pretty much learn everything you need to better your business as well as yourself. They have awesome classes on freelancing and entrepreneurship, film and video, art, graphic design. The list literally goes on. Each class giving you something that you can take and apply to your life. And sometimes learning new things can ease your mind in these crazy times. So the first 1,000 of my subscribers that click the link below in the description box will receive 2 months premium membership for free. So go ahead and check that out and support your girl. You know what I mean? So let's go ahead and get back to the video. All right, so I have all of my pattern pieces traced out here, and now it's time to measure. I'm going to cut the ends of the paper off to make the pieces more manageable for me. I've got all of my pieces traced and my lines drawn. Another good use for these lines we made is to use them as alignment notches when sewing. We can snip the notches in the fabric and use them to keep everything straight. So we're going to use our regular measuring tape to measure out all of the pieces. I'm going to measure the bust line, the under bust line, waistline, and hip line, and I'm going to add that to my chart. I like to draw out this chart to help me organize the numbers in my mind. I make a column for pattern, client, and adjustments. We are about to take the measurements of the pattern, and you should already have your client measurements. I have mine here, and we are going to calculate the adjustments momentarily. The measurements we need are your bust front and back, your under bust front and back, your waist front and back, And lastly, your high hip, front and back. Your high hip is usually about 4 inches below your waistline, but you need the front and back of that as well. For you to calculate what your front and back measurements for your client is, I usually just take the circumference measurements and then take my front measurements. And then when I'm here doing my grading, I subtract my front measurements by my circumference, and that gives you your back. I'm going to measure each piece edge to edge. So I've taken all of my measurements and I'm going to add them up off camera. Remember to keep your front measurements separate from your back because we will be grading them separately. We are going to start with the front bust. My pattern measures at 9 3/8, but my client is only 9 inches. So I need to remove 3/8 of an inch from the bust front. Now, since I have seen my client in person, I can tell that the 3/8 of an inch that we need to remove from the front needs to come from my princess seam line and not from any other seam. So I'm going to go ahead and mark out my negative 3/8 of an inch along my bust line between the two princess seam pieces. Then you want to grade them back up to our existing line, trying to make this curve as smooth as possible, and you can use a French curve to assist you with that. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our underbust. My underbust measures at 7 3/4, and my client's underbust measures at 8 7/8. So that means we have about 1 1/8 that we need to add on to this pattern. Now I'm going to add it on to all 5 seams. So seams meaning the edges of each pattern piece. There are 5 of them. So excluding the center front, by the way. So we're not doing the center front. So that means we need to add about 1/4 of an inch to all of the edges. Now I get this by taking 1 1/8 inch and dividing that by 5. And I get 1/4 of an inch, and I'm going to add that to all of the edges of my underbust. And I'm going to smooth those lines. You can use a French curve to help you. Since my bride is quite flat chested, I'm just going to go ahead and wing this by hand. So the next one that we need to do is our waistline, and my pattern waist measurement is 7 5/8, and my client is 8 3/8. So that means we have about 3/4 of an inch that we need to add to this pattern. So I'm going to once again add that to all 5 seams. So I need to add 1/8 of an inch, and I'm going to go ahead and smooth that line as well. So now that we've done that, the last one that we need to do for the front is the hip front. Now the pattern measurements for the hip front is 7 3/4, and my client is 9. So that means we have about 1 1/4 inch that we need to add to this pattern. And I'm going to go ahead and divide that by 5 as well. We're going to add that to all of our seams. So that means I need to add about 1/4 of an inch. Now these are so approximate, y'all. And sometimes it comes out like 0.28576 or whatever. And if it's like that, I'm just going to say 1/4 of an inch and call it what it is. Okay. So that's what I'm going to do. Now we need to move on to the back. So the first thing we're going to do is start off at the bust back. Super simple, guys. This is super easy. We're going to do this the same way that we did the front. So my bust back on my pattern is 6 5/8, and on my client, it's actually 8. So that means we need an inch and 3/8 added to the bust line of the back. That adds up to about 1/4 of an inch throughout the 5 seams. Now, what differs the back from the front is I'm not going to add anything to my side seams. I'm adding everything from the inner portion of the side panel all the way up. So including the center back piece. So I'm not adding any extra to the side seam. Now I'm not going to add any extra to my side seam because I noticed when I add extra to the side seam of the back piece, it pushes my side seam towards the front, and I don't want that. I want my side seam to stay where it is, and I want the pieces to be bigger towards the back. So I'm going to add all my adjustments to the back 5 seams of this. And I'm going to do the same thing for my underbust. My underbust is 6 inches on the pattern, and on my client it's 8.5 inches. That's a 2.5 inch difference. So I need to add 1/2 inch to all of my seams. And I'm also going to keep smoothing that up as well. You want to keep connecting your lines. Next is the waist back. My pattern's waist back is 5 3/4 inch, and on my client it is 8.5 inches. So that's a 2 3/4 difference. So that means I need to add another 1/2 inch to all of my seams. Now, once again, this is approximate, so you probably wouldn't need to add a little bit more than 1/2 inch, but since the back is a lace up, it really doesn't matter, y'all. So my last thing that I need to do is my hip in the back. On my pattern piece, the back hip is 8 1/4 inches, and on my client it is 9.5 inches. So I'm about 1.25 inches short. That means I need to add about 1/4 inch through all of my seams. Now that I have done that, I'm going to go ahead and smooth everything together, and I have my pattern number 1 done. Now after this, you want to make sure that you're making a mock-up and you're fitting your client or yourself to make sure that all of your adjustments and your everything that you added together is correct. Let me know if you guys need any help with this. This is the most simplified way that I can break it down. I'm gonna have a more advanced pattern drafting video coming up soon with this same pattern, but for now this is a simplified way to get where you need to go, and then you can make a mock-up and make all the fine-tuned adjustments that you need. I graded this in my client size here, and I also graded this in my size to test it to make sure that it would fit, and it actually fit me with minimal adjustments, and I'm pretty weird shaped, y'all. So if it fit me, it'll fit y'all. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching my video. I appreciate you guys more than you know. I'm sorry I've been gone for the week, but I have had quite a few big things happening in life, some good and some bad. So I just wanted to let you guys know that I'm still here and I will still be putting out regular content. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comments, and I'll see you in my next one.